Guys, the 2025 DCI season is literally right around the corner, with the first couple shows coming up in less than a month. And I was thinking about how this year will mark a quarter of a century of drum corps shows. And what's a better way to celebrate that than ranking the top 10 greatest DCI shows of the 21st century? Now, before I start a war in the comment sections, I know that it is literally impossible to be completely objective about this list, but I'm going to do my best. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to define what exactly I mean by greatest. For my top 10 list, I will be judging these shows based on three main criteria: innovation, significance, and execution. Innovation is how a show pushed the boundaries of the activity and changed the activity from that point on forever. Significance is how a show impacted the DCI community and how it was received and how it was remembered for years to come. And execution is just simply how perfect a show is from a technical standpoint. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with number 10.
Performing their 2014 program, Tilt. For international the Bluecoats.
In the past 25 years, when you think about a drum corps that pushes the boundaries of the activity the most, the Bluecoats definitely come to mind to me first. The Bluecoats 2014 show Tilt was a very simple concept that was just downright entertaining from top to bottom. From the huge tarp that literally tilted the boundary of the entire football field, to the genius angled horns down position in the brass, and of course, the groundbreaking use of electronics. This is the main reason this show is on the list, because of the precedent it set for the activity in terms of the use of electronics. When amplification was legalized in the activity, no one really used it for anything other than exactly that, amplifying the brass. But the way the Bluecoats used amplification as not just an effect, but as an entire feature moment is exactly why it's number 10 on this list. Angels and Demons was a revolutionary and beloved show that took the very simple concept of good and bad angels and demons to the absolute max. Splitting an entire drum corps into two separate uniforms was something that I don't think has ever been done in the activity before. And this made for some absolutely riveting and creatively unique drill and visuals. The task that the drill writer had of managing two sets of uniforms must have been pretty incredible, and it massively paid off an extremely competitive year like 2011. This show, unfortunately, was the last championship from the Cadets, rest in peace, but it will always be remembered as one of the greatest Cadets shows ever. I really can't think of a more iconic looking show than Phantom Regiment's Spartacus from 2008. When it comes to the storytelling genre of drum corps shows, this show is at the top of that list. The cultural significance that this show had at the time, and still to this day, is immeasurable. If you look up any video on YouTube that's like best drum corps moments of all time, this show easily shows up every single time. But if you were to introduce someone brand new to the DCI community who knew nothing about it, this show is definitely one of the top shows that you'd want to show someone, just because of how satisfying it is to watch and just how easy it is to appreciate. This show will be remembered for decades to come, and it's exactly why it belongs on this list at number 8. The early 2000s were like the golden era of the Cavaliers dynasty. And it's honestly hard to choose which one of these shows belongs on this list, but I think the Cavaliers 2002 show Frameworks is that show. The drumline was absolutely banging, the brass was incredible, and the guard was lights out amazing. All the cylinders were firing for the Cavaliers this year. But for me, what puts this show in the top 10 of the 21st century is Michael Gaines' drill. For drill writers across the country, this era of the Cavaliers is like the holy grail of drill writing. It was so revolutionary, so unique, and just so satisfying to watch. From a visual standpoint, this show is truly remarkable, and it sets the tone at the turn of the century for what the golden standard of drill should be. Okay, I do have to admit that the Blue Devils 2012 show, Cabaret Voltaire, is my favorite show of all time, but I can tell you objectively why I think it deserves to be on this list. Okay, so like during the early 2010s, the Blue Devils were doing some very weird, atonal, not very approachable shows from an audience perspective, and I think this show is the culmination of the Blue Devils doing this style at its very, very best. Cabaret Voltaire is a show about the avant-garde art movement known as Dadaism, which was essentially the idea of questioning the norms and boundaries of what art and society are. And the Blue Devils took this idea and translated it onto the stage of drum corps. From their revolutionary mid-show costume changes, which most drum corps do now to this day, to the genius design of the props that were also coat hangers for those uniforms, and the absolutely insanely challenging musical repertoire. I could literally go on for hours talking about how cool this show is, and we're not even going to talk about how much people hated this show in favor of Crown's show that year. But this show is truly an artistic masterpiece across the board and deserves to be on this list for that reason. I remember when I was marching at the Blue Devils back in 2018, and during the preseason, we had heard all these rumors of like, oh, the Vanguard this year, this is their year, they're back. And I was like, okay, whatever. But as soon as I saw their show, even in the early season, I knew they had something really, really special. Babylon is probably a lot of you guys watching your #1 show of all time, and it deserves to be there. With an absolutely enthralling musical selection from top to bottom, this show draws you in from the second they walk on the field. There are so many iconic moments throughout this show, like the ballad soloists, the backflip, the mellow sustain. Even the drum majors had iconic moments. But when I look back, one thing always stands out to me about this show, and it's the costuming. I think SCV really changed the entire landscape of costume design for drum corps with their show this year. They introduced a more street look with the baggy fit and these drop crotch pants, and it was just something that had never been done before, and it really expanded the realm of what's possible in the activity in terms of costume design. Now, some would argue that this show needs to be even higher up on this list, but let's get through the rest of this list before you make that decision. Okay guys, I know that it is literally impossible for me to not sound biased because I did watch this show, but I believe that objectively this show belongs on this list for a number of reasons. So the 2010s in general was a huge time of progression and change in the drum corps activity. There was a lot of things happening in terms of electronics, with people using amplification more and more heavily. The size of props grew and the functionality of them grew as well. And there were definitely a lot more ambitious choices in terms of costume design. And with all of this change, there became a sort of divide in the community, in my opinion, about kind of old drum corps versus new drum corps. And people were very vocally expressing their disdain for how the activity was changing at the time. And then came along Blue Devil's 2017 show, The Metamorph. And this show was literally about all of this change that was happening in the DCI activity. So what this show did was that it both honored the history of the activity, but also embraced the future of the activity. You can see how this is reflected in the way we start the show with the company front, just like it always used to be back in the day. Even the uniforms at the beginning of the show were inspired by a more traditional old school Blue Devil uniform. Then as the show progresses, we transformed out of these uniforms and revealed a new, more modern take on the Blue Devils look. And there's just so many details like this that are littered throughout the show. And I just think it's such a genius idea of honoring and accepting the future of the activity and where it's going. But what this show did to me was that it kind of united the community in a way. And like the most common thing I heard from this year was like, oh, I'm not a Blue Devils fan. I don't like them at all, but I really like this show they're doing this year. And yeah, I think that's why it deserves to be up on this list. All right, we've arrived at our top three, and I think you all knew this show was coming. Downside Up was literally a monumentally historic moment for the activity, and I would say that it kind of marks the modern era of drum corps altogether. I remember when the Bluecoats came into the 2016 season and they were tweeting things like,
"Drum corps will be changed forever."
And I thought it was ridiculous at the time, but it is true. It's true. This show changed drum corps forever. The props were huge, and nothing like that had ever been done at that scale in that way. And it just absolutely just shocked people when they came onto the field with these giant half pipes. The costuming was so ambitious, so different, so weird to people in the activity who had never seen something like this before. Also, just the flow and the sound of their show was so different and so refreshingly unique. And we can't forget about the wink, of course. But in my opinion, there's not another show in history that altered the status quo of what drum corps is and what it can be than Downside Up. Now, if this show was just a list of the top 10 most innovative shows, this would be number one on that list. But for my list, this show is number 3 because while it is definitely groundbreaking, it pretty much carried itself to a win on GE alone. That year, all the other captions were kind of won by Crown and the Blue Devils, and there's objectively some dirt in this show. However, that does not take away from the fact that this show is undeniably incredible and amazing and deserves to be number 3 on this list. When you think of a perfect show, I think Carolina Crown 2013 definitely comes to mind. For years, Carolina Crown climbed the ranks, getting better and better each year and establishing themselves as the crown jewel of brass in the activity. And all of that led to =MC². I'm pretty sure this show was the first ever perfect brass score of the modern era of drum corps. It was also Carolina Crown's first ever championship win, and it was just an absolutely epic saga of love beyond the bounds of time and space, expressed through a phenomenal color guard and the best brass section of all time. I can't think of a show that more people wanted to see win than this show, and I think it definitely cemented Carolina Crown in the history books as one of the greatest drum corps of all time. Now, this show is near perfect, but the one thing that most people would comment about is the percussion section, which is not the best. I believe they got 5th this year, so it's not exactly perfect, but it's super close, and it definitely deserves to be super high up on this list as just one of the greatest shows of all time.
Performing their 2014 program, Fellini-esque. Drum Corps International is proud to present the Blue Devils!
And we've arrived at our number one spot. Maybe not super surprising. It is the highest scoring show of all time with the 99.65. But Blue Devils 2014 show, Fellini-esque, in my opinion, is the greatest show of all time. Don't say it's a cop-out because it's the highest scoring show of all time. I actually think that doesn't really have as much to do with it. But the reason why Fellini-esque to me is the number one greatest show of all time is because if we're looking at the 3 categories that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, innovation, significance, and execution, I think this show is so high at the top of all 3 of those categories more than any other show that I think it needs to be number 1 on this list. From a technical execution standpoint, this show is absolutely mind-blowing. From a visual perspective of a near perfect color guard and an absolutely stunning visual program in the drill, in the choreography, this show is just so fun to watch because of how good every single element is. The brass sounded absolutely incredible this year, winning the Jim Ott. The drum line was insanely good this year as well, even though they lost the Fred Sanford to Santa Clara Vanguard. It was the only caption they didn't win at the end of the day. But for me, what makes this show so amazing is that they took this concept of Fellini and his body of work, and they created an entire world and an entire program that flowed so well from top to bottom in every single aspect, from the props to the costume design to the choreography to all the little things that they put in there, the music, all of it perfectly enhancing and driving home a perfect show, a perfect concept, a perfect story. And I think that in the modern era of drum corps, this is the magnum opus of what drum corps can be. It is such a mature and beautiful and professional show. This show to me is just one of the greatest shows of all time, but to me, the number 1 greatest show of the 21st century. So that's my list, guys. I know that there's going to be people that have their own opinions. Let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments, but thank you guys for watching. I'm super excited for this upcoming drum corps season, and I hope to see you on the road at some point. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.